That's right, Gemma. I can read.
Leave her alone. She's better at this than we are.
That's okay. That's very true.
Do you not remember last week?
I remember. I paid.
Gemma, I didn't know if you were able to get through all of Ted the Caver, but this is what happens when you don't join us. It's just sex caves and wop spaghetti.
Erotic spaghetti.
To be fair, I was in the chat, like, I'd been drinking a lot of gin and just was like going, I get it, penis joke.
Yes. And yes, Kenzie, I remember. I commissioned Cricket two drawings based on it.
Were you still in the listening in the chat by the time I actually brought in spaghetti?
I think so. To be fair, but to be honest, I don't remember much of the end of it.
Fair enough.
I
You
remember
had a lot of gin.
I had a lot of gin. I did. It was an interesting evening.
I remember it came out. Hello, Raptor. I remember the spaghetti thing came out of nowhere too. Like, I commented on like it was gross, like the sounds you were making with the spaghetti. You're just like, oh yeah, you made them again. You're like, that's a WAP.
I wasn't even trying to. I think my phone was just too close to the bowl as I was trying to like twirl it around my fork.
Hello, Mr. Coon.
And then you brought it up, so I'm like, you know what? We're just gonna have some fun with this.
Excellent.
The sex cave jokes have been lax lately.
It was literally like that bit in like Lady in the Basement, like pulling it in.
We mentioned that.
Cradling balls.
Yeah, like, you know how like at the end of that video that we did on Eli Socrae, that was like that he's like, I'm a talented individual at the end. That's gonna be the new joke at the end of it's like the new cradling the balls joke that appeared at the end of a bunch of Bakuya Past episodes just to throw shade at Eli Socrae.
Yes.
Oh yes. Thing is that I hope I'm remembering that this was in the same episode. I'm almost positive it was. The cradling the balls line wasn't even the one that stood out to me the most. That Matt said. I remember at one point he goes, Ash Ketchum's genitals, what's happening? And I'm just like, did I hear that right?
Okay,
and I'm like, how has no one brought attention to that?
For anyone watching this in the future, I assure you this is a dramatic reading. We're getting to it.
We're bad at this.
You know what? Might as well for a moment here. Oh, God. Wet ass pasta, yes. The epic conclusion of Quill and Ink Friend.
Get a bucket and a mop, it's some wet ass pasta.
Ha.
I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
Kenzie eating spaghetti, that's a WAP.
I was gonna say, okay, either we lost Kenzie or she's contemplating killing us both right now.
No, just me.
Don't.
Just
I was
myself.
gonna say, like, oh no, Kenzie saw what I posted in the Cursed Museum.
Oh, no. I'm glad you brought that up. Raptor, as much as we love you, Gemma and I are officially taking over a cursed museum. I think we have proven in the past 24 hours we are way more qualified.
It's just, my dad sent me some really cursed images yesterday. As my he posted up a bunch of like really offensive stuff about all this stuff to do with the royals, and I'm just like, thanks.
No.
It's like, I can't show this to anyone.
You can show it to me.
That's how I actually introduced my mom to Aussie Man Reviews, was his video of commentating over the Oprah interview with Harry and Meghan.
Nice.
So, which royal is the most racist? Everyone. It's Andrew, isn't it? he's already a pedo. Why not just add flagrant racist?
I remember Cobe posted on Facebook today. It was like, I don't mean to nitpick, but are we just glossing over the fact that one of the royal family took vacations with a known pedophile?
Yeah, it was like, yeah, this is the worst thing to happen to the royal family in 86 years, and it's like 2020 was a thing.
Yeah.
Like,
we talked about, Andrew being BFFs with Epstein for a good hot minute, literally a minute, and then we all moved on, apparently.
Yeah. What is the Cursed Museum? Mr. Kuhn, do you have a Discord account? Because that's part of my server there. One of the channels is called the Cursed Museum, where we post cursed images.
there's also Panjail, which I lord over.
Yes.
So
Well,
if you make
Gemma and I
puns,
post
get-
cursed images. Everyone else posts, rainbow and happy bullshit and pretend it's cursed.
Speaking of titles, though, Kenzie, did you notice that I gave you one?
I did.
Excellent. Don't worry.
I was confused at first. I'm like, I noticed like my name in Discord was green now, and I'm like, wait a minute, something's different. And it took me a minute.
Don't worry, I gave myself the same title, and I gave Gemma
I know,
a second one too.
That's why I didn't say anything, because I'm like, if he's gonna be a hypocrite, I'm calling him out.
No.
I'm gonna have a look.
Okay.
I need to look at it.
Why did I sound like Donald Pleasance at the end of Halloween 4 there? No! No! No!
I don't remember anything past 3.
Fair.
Disappointed dramatic reader. Excellent.
Yep. Speaking of which, should we unveil our second commission?
Yes. Let's wait for some more people to come in. But
Gotcha.
okay, Mr. Kuhn, if you want to send a friend request, my name on Discord is Bean Daddy Mandela, like spaces between the number 7106, and I can give you an invite to the server. I'm not going to say that it's a sane, happy place, but it's
It'll work.
fun.
Good people when it counts.
Yes.
Like when Cricket's drunk. What was last night?
I don't know. Like, I looked and I was like, oh my god, what did I miss? What's going on?
It was at first, like, she mentions that, she's got a thing for her uncle's girl, and at first I'm like, I think at first it's so funny, and then it gets serious real quick, and I'm like, oh shit, is she okay?
Yeah.
It was so weird. I was actually in the midst of, like, texting her or messaging her privately when she finally got back and was like, no, I'm okay.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Yeah, it's like the one night that I go and do something, I look back and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, what is this?
Dare you have a life?
Yeah, that she's like, yeah, Mandy, why don't you use your real name? Finish Black Sail Season 2. This is a threat. Okay, I promise I will, Cobe. I'm halfway through the last episode.
Yeah, you need to finish Black Sails, or at least get where we are. Get on our level.
Jeez. I mean, at least Cobe admitted that he was threatening me. You're just like insulting me.
It's like, get on our level.
Get good, scrub.
Get on our level, nerd.
Don't worry, I was saying the exact same thing to like my sister earlier and trying to sort of like tailor it to her. I was like, yeah, no, like it's like a pirates and there's lots of girl on there, so that'll be happy for you. She's just like, thanks, Gemma. That's really gonna help.
Yeah, I still remember the scene where he meets a Blackbeard.
Yes, that one.
It's 2021. It's African American beard.
No, it's basketball American beard. Yeah, I went there.
Read Raptor's comment.
Black sales should have been called sales of color. Thank you, Raptor. Again, people in future viewings, I swear, this is a dramatic reading of the last chapter.
No, it's not.
Penpal.
Yes, come on, guys. Come on. I'm the disappointed one.
You say that as it's never
Okay.
true.
Okay, well, I said I was going to wait for more people to come in, but since Gemma is officially disappointed us, I will put the new picture up. Yes, family member, I want you to watch this show and get horny.
You're in good company, Gemma. Every Friday, my grandma and I binge watch Dexter.
Excellent.
Oh, did you? Next. I tried
There
saying
it
nice
is.
and then saying next.
Wait, you tried saying what?
I tried to say nice and ended up saying next. Just like, alright, that's it now.
This is about as
You're
serious
typing
as a
it in,
threat
aren't
from
you?
Eli Socrae. I'm not getting over that. Yes, family member, I want you to watch this and get horny. I'm never getting over that. Glorious.
That's somehow going to become a running gag in the Discord. If we have to use that often, though, then we should be concerned.
That's gonna So,
this
friends.
ninja'd me. Wait, what?
So, Friends. That's the name of this chapter, isn't it?
Oh.
Dan 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 dan.
So no one told you life was gonna be this way. And with how YouTube's been working, like, video immediately taken down. Sending my relatives to horny jail, I don't give a fuck.
That's just how I roll, isn't it?
Damn it. Alright, yes. Chapter 5, Friends.
Isn't it chapter 6?
No. Oh wait, yes.
I've been on for only 3 chapters, and I'm better at this than you.
Gemma told her sister to get horny watching a show.
Smoke screen.
So why does my ankle feel like it's broken? Oh god, not you too.
Whose ankle feels like it's broken?
Cove.
Cobe,
Oh no! Cobe!
what'd you do?
Why didn't you tell me?
I know it's been like a year, but like you're not supposed to reenact or imitate what Gemma did. Smoke ball.
Cobe's in the hospital. This is just how he's telling you. By the way,
Like,
Gemma, I broke my ankle.
It's like I've only been upstairs for 20 minutes.
It's like, I know I said I'd be upstairs with Logan, but I'm actually in the hospital. Who the hell is Logan talking to?
That's why I'm in the hospital. I jumped out the window.
Yeah, I just heard Manny start talking and was like, nope, can't take this anymore. Because it's come on all of a sudden.
I've had some weird experiences with Logan. Like, he's sort of I've heard him walk. I've heard him walk down the stairs, and I thought that he went into the living room and then went and looked in the bedroom and he was still there. And I'm just like, what? It only like it was no time for him to come back up. I'm just like, what is going on?
Oh no, Cove's really hurting.
Logan's
Oh
a
my god, it
teleporter.
hurts so much.
Hello, Darius.
Cope, please take some like anti-inflammatories or something, and make sure you keep it upright.
Logan broke Cobb's ankle. Try to tell me to do my homework, will you? Crack. Real talk, where are the painkillers and can I reach them without walking? That's directed at you, Gemma.
I will be back. I'll just go and I'll just give them to him and then come back.
Okay. So, short interlude here before we've even started reading.
Dramatic reading.
Yes.
As Manny keeps wanting to convince you it is. It's not. He lying to all of you.
When we get to the actual reading, it will be dramatic. More like 10-15, pal. Ha, got him. I get it, Bagel. I see what you did there. Because Pen 15 looks like penis. If you and Kenzie are bad dramatic readers and Gemma is a disappointed dramatic reader, then what am I? The one who made the unfortunate decision to read a story with us.
The unwitting friend who doesn't know how idiotic we actually are.
Like you say you're having fun, but the whole time when we're reading Empress Teresa, you're just sitting there like, why have I done this?
These two are adults, right?
Yeah, we're the ones saying like, okay, we're drinking, but not you, Raptor. You're not old enough. We're the adults here.
And then we start making fun of people on the internet.
Yes. Yeah, you making WAP spaghetti sounds and me laughing my ass off over them.
Making a guy just trying to live his dream on YouTube. You just keep talking about lint.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
I sorted the thing.
The thing.
Yes, I was very nice.
You sorted the cobe.
Yes.
Oh boy.
So reading.
Shouldn't make fun of people on the internet, you guys. Yeah, you're right. One of them might be a massive pussy who challenges you to a boxing match and then backs out.
Oh yeah. One of them might threaten to beat up their significant other.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No.
Oh yeah, loved the latest community post, by the way. where I translate pretty much his message.
Cobe says, I'm the thing. It's a clobbering time, Cobe. Hello, Stipsy Stips. Okay, we can do this. Chapter 6. Friends. On the first day of kindergarten, my mother had elected to drive me to school. We were both nervous, and she wanted to be there with me all the way up to the moment I walked into class. It took me a bit longer to get ready in the morning due to my still mending arm. The cast came up a couple inches past my elbow, which meant that I had to cover the entire arm with a specially designed latex bag when I showered. The bag was built to pull tight around the opening in order to seal out any water that might otherwise destroy the cast. Since I still had use of my dominant hand, I had gone really adept at cinching the bag myself. That morning, however, perhaps due to my excitement or nervousness, I hadn't pulled the strap tight enough, and halfway through the shower I could feel water pooling inside the bag around my fingers. I jumped out and tore the latex shield away, but could feel the previously rigid plaster become soft after absorbing the water. Because there is no way to effectively clean the area between your body and a cast, the dead skin that would normally have fallen away merely sits there. When stirred by moisture like sweat, it emits an odor, and apparently, this odor is proportionate to the amount of moisture introduced, because soon after I began attempting to dry it, I was struck by the powerful stench of rot. As I continued to rub it frantically with the towel, the cast began to disintegrate into thick white strips that rained down upon my feet, while small white flakes wafted into the air and seemed to hover like snowflakes. I was growing increasingly distressed.
Really, no joke.
No.
Come on.
Dramatic.
No one comes here for dramatic reading. They come here for us to act like jackasses while reading an actual good story.
And back on the screen.
Dramatic.
I'll take responsibility for this one.
Good. I was growing increasingly distressed. I had put as much effort as a child could into his very first day of school. I had sat with my mom picking out my clothes the night before. I had spent a great deal of time picking out my backpack, and I had become exceedingly excited to show everyone my lunchbox that had the Ninja Turtles on it. I had fallen into my mom's habit of calling these children I hadn't yet met my friends already, but as the condition of my cast worsened, I became deeply upset at the thought that surely I wouldn't be able to apply that label to anyone by the time this day was over. When I realized that attempting to wipe the cast dry was actually destroying it, I wrapped the towel around my arm and pressed it hard against my chest while leaning forcefully against the counter in an effort to soak up the water without agitating the surface of the cast. But the wet plaster began to collapse under my weight, and the force transferred down to my weak and cracked bones. Pain arced through my arm, and I half successfully stifled a scream. I couldn't fix it myself. Defeated, I showed my mum. It took 30 minutes to get most of the moisture out while working to preserve the rest of the cast. The combination of placing restrained pressure on an absorbent cloth while running a hairdryer over the length of the cast was enough to solve the hydration issue. To address the problem of the spell, my mum cut slivers off a bar of soap and slid them down into the cast. She then rubbed the remainder of the soap on the outside in an attempt to cocoon the rancid smell inside of a more pleasant one. There was no repair work that could be done, but she could at least control the damage. By the time we arrived at the school, my classmates were already engaged in their second activity, and the teacher shoehorned me into one of the already established groups. I'm sure that the teacher explained to me in great detail what the guidelines of the activity were, but I was so nervous and distracted that I must have misunderstood. Within about 5 minutes, I had violated the rules so badly that each member of the group complained to the teacher and asked why I had to be in their group. The teacher tried to make peace, but the damage was done. I sat at the table with my free hand in my pocket. I had brought a marker to school in hopes that I could collect some signatures or drawings on my cast next to my mother's. And as I rolled the marker between my fingertips, I suddenly felt very foolish for having even put it in my pocket that morning. Gemma, would you like to take the next 3 pages?
Yeah. After the exercise was over, we watched as our teacher brought a large rolled-up piece of paper out of the classroom's closet. While it is generally difficult to maintain the attention of so many children, the size of the object held our interest. We watched as she tacked the top and bottom left-hand corners of the paper to the wall as she talked to us. When the corners were secure, she unrolled the large cylinder of paper from left to right, and we saw what it was. It was a map. The teacher had us line up to leave the classroom for lunch. When we filed into the lunchroom, the faculty members from each group guided us to our cluster of tables and corrected students who tried to sit at the restricted yet unoccupied seats. There were no other students in there. Kindergartners had the lunchroom to themselves at my elementary school, and this meant that I wouldn't have to sit by myself. In a year's time, I would be all alone at the table about 8 feet away. But despite the fact that I was surrounded by classmates, I think I felt lonelier right then than in all the initial weeks of first grade isolation combined. One of the faculty members was making an announcement that no one seemed to be listening to, while most of the kids were chatting energetically. I was eavesdropping on their conversations while self-consciously picking at the frayed ends of my cast when a kid sat across from me. Just out of curiosity, is this Josh?
Yes.
I like your lunchbox, he said. I could tell he was making fun of me, and I grew really angry. In my mind, that lunchbox was the last good thing about my day. I'd used it every day at home since my mum had got it for me. She would make me sandwiches and put them in my lunchbox, and I would carry it to the white dining room table and eat them. It wasn't for practice, I was just excited to use it. Lunch that day in school was the first time I had used my lunchbox out of the house, and despite everything that had happened with my cast and the group earlier that day, I was still excited to use it officially. I didn't look up from my arm to face my classmate because I felt a burning in my eyes from the tears that I was holding back. As I struggled to maintain my composure, I looked up to tell the kid to leave me alone.
Oh, we lost her.
Yep.
Would you like to continue reading until she gets back? Oh,
She's back.
What?
No, Manny,
What
I will not replace Gemma.
What happened?
You just cut out. You were gone.
That's weird. Okay, I didn't do anything. Yeah, so what was the last thing I said?
Tell the kid to leave me alone.
Alright. Before I could get the words out, I saw something that made me pause. He had the exact same lunchbox. I laughed.
I like your lunchbox too.
I think Michelangelo's the coolest, he said, while miming nunchuck moves.
What a nerd.
Aww.
This was the first conversation I'd ever had with another kid my own age that wasn't guided or chaperoned by my mother. While I had a lot of freedom in my neighborhood, there weren't any other kids that were my age, so when I played alone. Even though this new dynamic made me slightly nervous, it was a good kind of nervous. I was speaking up to rebut his preference by saying that Raphael was my favourite, when he knocked his open carton of milk off the table and onto his lap. "Oh, crap!" he said, and immediately covered his mouth with both hands and reflexively shifted his eyes from side to side to see who might have heard it. I tried very hard to stifle my laughter since I didn't know him at all, but the struggling look on my face must have struck him as funny because he started laughing first. Suddenly, I didn't feel so bad about my cast and thought that this person would hardly notice now anyway. As we laughed with one another, I thought to try my luck.
Hey, do you want to sign my cast?
As I worked the marker out of my pocket, he asked me how I broke my arm. I told him that I fell out of the tallest tree in my neighborhood, and he seemed impressed. I watched him laboriously draw his name on my cast, pausing before each letter to draw it in the air to make sure that it felt right. When he was done, I asked him what it said. He told me it said Josh. Josh and I had lunch together every day, and whenever we could, we partnered up for projects. We became really close very quickly, to the point that if Josh was ever absent from school, I would feel a bit lost the entire day. We worked well together, both within and outside of the curriculum of our grade. I helped him with his handwriting, and when I could, his spelling, and he took the blame when I wrote "fart" on the wall in permanent marker. I would come to know other kids, but I think I knew even then that Josh was my only real friend.
Kenzie, would you like to take over?
Yep.
Fart.
Damn it.
What?
Nothing. Go ahead and read.
Wait, can I read Bagel's comment first?
Yes.
I like this lunchbox. Another!
God damn.
Just chucks it at the wall. Okay. Dramatic reading. Moving a friendship outside of school when you are 5 is actually more difficult than most remember. The Friday we launched our balloons, the atmosphere was so energetic and excited that, when I had finished transcribing my letter, I joined Joss at his desk and asked him if he wanted to come to my house after school to play and maybe even stay the night. He said he did and that he'd bring some of his toys. I said that we could also go exploring in the woods around my house. When I got home, I asked my mom if Josh could come to our house, and she said that would be fine. My enthusiasm was boundless until I realized I had no way of contacting Josh to tell him. I spent the whole weekend worrying that our friendship would be dissolved by Monday. When I saw him after the weekend, I was relieved to find that he had run into the same obstacle and thought that it was funny. Later that week, we both remembered to write down our phone numbers at home and then exchange them at school. My mom spoke with Josh's dad, and it was decided that she would pick up Josh and me from school that Friday. We altered this basic structure nearly every weekend. If we managed to make plans far enough in advance, we would even secure permission slips from our parents so that we could just get off the bus with each other at either his or my house. The fact that we lived so close to one another made the arrangements much easier for our parents, who seemed to work constantly. As time moved along, I found it more difficult to imagine doing things without Josh. That's not to say I actively tried to imagine such things, but as an only child, I had never had the disposition to picture myself with anyone else, except maybe my mother. As Josh and I grew closer, however, whenever I thought of a new place to go or a new activity to try, I always reflexively inserted Josh into the scenario. We had so many adventures when I lived in my old house that I find it difficult to remember them at all. The actual nature of what we were doing never really seemed to have any impact on how fun the activity was for us. As long as we were together, we had a good time. When my mom and I moved across the city during the summer after first grade, I was sure that our friendship had seen its last day. As we drove away from the house that I had lived in my whole life, I felt a sadness that I knew wasn't just about a house. I was saying goodbye to my friend forever. But, to my surprise and delight, Josh and I stayed close. Despite the fact that we spent the majority of our time apart and only saw one another on weekends, we remained remarkably similar as we grew. Our personalities coalesced, our sense of humor complemented each other's, and we would often find that we had started liking new things independently. I would sometimes call Josh, or he would call me, to share information about some new TV show or toy, only to find that it was old news for the other. We even sounded enough alike that when I stayed with Josh, he would sometimes call my mom pretending to be me. His success rate was impressive. My mom would sometimes joke that the only way she could tell us apart sometimes was by our hair. He had straight, dirty blonde hair like his sister, while I had curly, dark brown hair like my mother. Grow up. One would think that the thing most likely to drive two young friends apart would be what's out of their control. I'm quite sure that many friendships have stagnated when only one party is forced to move away. The parents thinking that their children will just make new friends. While I feared at the time that this would be the case for us, I think the catalyst for our gradual disengagement was my insistence that we sneak out to my old house to look for boxes. That night, perhaps because we were old enough to reflect on it appropriately, seemed to cause a rift between us. Not a striking and violent rift, but a gradual one, like two continents parting ways. The weekend after our excursion, I invited Joss over to my house, in keeping with our tradition of alternating houses, but he said he wasn't really feeling up to it. If I'm honest, neither was I, and so I didn't protest. But maybe I should have. We began seeing progressively less of one another over the next year or so. Our time together had gone from once a week to once a month to every couple of months. Unlike when we were kids, we seemed to struggle to find things to do or talk about. But it was gradual enough that perhaps we didn't notice it, even if we might have felt it.
Alright, thank you. I'll take the next three.
Okay.
For my 12th birthday, my mum threw a party for me. I hadn't made that many friends since we'd moved, so it wasn't a surprise party since my mum didn't know who to invite. I told the handful of kids with whom I had become acquainted, but I was fine with a smaller party. I didn't want to invite a person just because I recognized him in the hallway. About a week before the party, I called Josh to see if he wanted to come. He said that he didn't think he could make it. My mom had planned a lot of games and activities. There would be a piñata, pin the tail on the donkey, and she even convinced a coworker to come perform a part of his amateur magic show. Oh, his. I thought it was gonna be, was Samantha again.
Fucking Samantha.
That bitch.
It occurred to me as we sat on the phone in silence that Josh might think he was too old for these activities, and I tried to reassure him that he didn't have to play any of the games or watch the magician, but he said that he just didn't feel up to a party. He said,
Maybe some other time.
and we hung up. After the phone call, I told my mom that I didn't want to have a party. I told her that I was too old for those games and that magicians were for kids. I told her that the whole thing was a dumb idea that she never should have had. The Conversation with Josh had hurt me tremendously, and senselessly, the only thing that I could think to do was try to hurt her. It didn't work, and she just smiled and put her arm on my shoulder and said,
"It'll be fine, sweetheart."
and inexplicably, I felt better. The day before the party, Josh called me in better spirits to say that he would be there. It had been several months since I had seen him. I was excited that we would get to spend time together and not have to worry about what to do or what to talk about, since there would be activities. I wasn't sure why he had changed his mind, but it didn't really matter to me. He was coming. The party went pretty well. My biggest concern was that Josh and the other kids wouldn't get along, but they seemed to like each other well enough. Josh was quieter than I hoped he'd be. He hadn't brought me a gift, and he apologized for that, but I told him that it wasn't a big deal. I was just glad that he was able to make it. I tried to start several conversations with him, but they seemed to keep reaching dead ends. I didn't know what else to do. I had acclimated to the timid disposition that he had developed over the last couple years, but I had hoped that things might be different that day. I asked him what was wrong. I told him that I didn't get why things had become so awkward between us. They were never like that before. We used to hang out almost every weekend and talk on the phone every couple of days. I suspected that it all really was because of the night we snuck back to my old house, and even though I couldn't know for certain, my voice trembled and quaked as I told him that Boxes was my cat. That wasn't fair for him to hold that night against me for so long. But he didn't say anything. At a loss, I asked him what happened to us. He looked up from staring at his shoes and just said,
"You left."
I was about to ask Josh what he meant by that, when my mom yelled in from the other room that it was time to open presents. I forced a smile onto my face and walked into the dining room as they sang Happy Birthday. There were a couple of wrap boxes and a pile of cards, most of which were from my extended family since they lived out of state. Most of the gifts were silly and forgettable, but I remember that a kid named Brian gave me a Mighty Max toy shaped like a snake that I kept for years afterwards. My mom was insistent that I open all the cards and thank each person who had given one, because several years before on Christmas, I had torn through the wrapping paper and envelopes with such fervor that I destroyed any possibility of discerning who had sent which gift or what amount of money. We separated the ones that had been sent by mail and the ones that had been brought that day so that my friends wouldn't have to sit through me opening cards from people that they had never met. Most of the cards from my friends had a few dollars in them. One envelope didn't have my name written on it, but it was in the pile, so I opened it. The card had some birthday balloons on its face and seemed to be a card that had been received by someone else who was now recycling it for my birthday because it was a little dingy. I actually appreciated the idea that it was a reused card since I'd always thought that cards were silly. I angled it so that the money wouldn't fall out to the floor when I opened it, but the only thing I said was the message that had come printed in the card. I love you. Whoever had given me this card hadn't written anything in it, but they had circled the message in pencil a couple times. I chuckled a little and said, "Gee, thanks for the awesome card, Mom." She looked at me inquisitively and then turned her attention to the card. She told me it wasn't from her and seemed amused as she took the card from my hand and showed my friends, looking at their faces, trying to discern who had played the joke. None of the kids stepped forward, so my mom said,
"Don't worry, sweetheart. At least you now know that two people love you."
and Gemma, would you like to take the next three?
Cool. She followed that with an extremely prolonged and excruciating kiss on my forehead that transformed the group's bewilderment into hysteria. They were all laughing now, so it could have been any of them, but one of the boys named Mike seemed to be laughing the hardest. To become a participant rather than the subject of the gag, I said to him that just because he had given me the card, he shouldn't think that I'd kiss him later. He gave me a slightly bewildered look, and we all laughed. As I looked at Josh, I saw that he was finally smiling. "Well, I think that gift might be a winner, but you still have a couple more to open." My mum slid another present in front of me. I was still feeling the tremors of suppressed chuckles in my abdomen as I tore the colourful paper away. When I saw the gift, however, there was no more laughter in me to stifle. My smile dropped as I looked at what I'd been given. It was a pair of walkie-talkies. "Well, go on, show everyone," my mother encouraged. I held them up, and everyone seemed to approve. But as I drew my attention to Josh, I could see that he had turned a sickly shade of white. We locked eyes for a moment, and then he turned and walked into the kitchen. As I watched him dial a number on the corded phone attached to the wall, my mum whispered in my ear that she knew that Josh and I didn't talk as much since one of the walkie-talkies had broken, so she thought I'd like it. I was filled with an intense appreciation for my mum's thoughtfulness, but this feeling was easily overpowered by the emotions resurrected by the returning memories I tried so hard to bury. While everyone was eating cake, I asked Josh whom he had called. He told me he wasn't feeling well, so he called his dad to come get him. I understood that he wanted to leave, but it was so hard to get Josh to come to my house that I, perhaps selfishly, wished that he would stay, despite how he was feeling. I told him that I wished we could hang out more. I extended one of the walkie-talkies to him, but he put his hand up in refusal. Dejected, I said,
Well, thanks for coming, I guess. I hope I see you before my next birthday.
I'm sorry. I'll try to call you back more often. I really will, he said. The conversation stalled as we waited by my door for his dad. The rest of the kids watched my mother's co-worker perform magic. Rather than sounds of amazement, most of the vocalizations were critical, but in good fun. Despite the haranguing, the magician and my mother seemed happy. Perhaps it was exactly what they expected. I repeatedly opened my mouth as if words would just pour out and catch the interest of my friend, but I would silently shut it each time. I looked at his face. Josh seemed genuinely remorseful that he hadn't made more of an effort, but I thought I perceived some other brooding emotion behind his regret, though I couldn't tell what it was. As I stared at him, perhaps a little too intensely, his mood seemed to be suddenly bolstered by an idea that had struck him. He looked over to me and said that he knew what he'd get me for my birthday. It would take a while, but he thought that I would really like it. I dismissed it outright. I told him it wasn't a big deal and that I didn't need a gift, but he insisted. He seemed in better spirits and apologized for being such a drag at my party. He said he would call me soon, and when I said he didn't have to treat me like a baby, he told me that if he didn't bother to call, then he wasn't worth being friends with anyway. There was a knock at the door. Josh opened it and stepped out of my house and next to his father. I could see Veronica sitting in the truck waiting impatiently. I thought about giving Josh a hug, but realized that might be embarrassing for the both of us, so I just gave him a low five. He apologized again as he walked off, and he said that he was tired and that he hadn't been sleeping well, and I asked him why that was. He turned back towards me and waved goodbye as he answered my question. I think I've been sleepwalking. That was the last time I saw my friend, and a couple of months later he was gone.
Alright. Kenzie, do you want to take the next three?
Yep. Since I began this attempt to learn more about my childhood, the relationship between my mother and me had grown increasingly strained. Each time she would give me a piece of my past, I could feel myself becoming more complete, the structure of my autobiography finally falling into place and with the connecting of milestones or the introduction of a never-known fact. But I don't think I realized how much of herself she was losing in the process. Still, I thought we could take it. But maybe I was letting my wishes about the strength of our bond distort my perception of how strong it actually was. It's often the case that one cannot know the breaking point of a thing until that thing fractures. The last conversation that I had with my mother left me with what I'll now share with you. I'm not sure where this last discussion and all the ones that preceded it will leave me and my mom. I imagine that we will spend the rest of our lives attempting to repair what had taken a lifetime to build. She had put so much energy into keeping me safe, both physically and psychologically, but I think that the walls meant to insulate me from harm were also protecting her emotional stability. As the truth came pouring out the last time we spoke, I could hear a trembling in her voice that I think was a reverberation of the collapse of her world. I don't imagine my mother and I will talk very much anymore, and while there are still some things I don't understand, I think I know enough now. After Josh had disappeared, his parents had done all they could to find him. From the very first day, the police had suggested that they contact all the parents of the kids that knew Josh to see if he might be with them. They did this, of course, but no one had seen him or had any idea of where he might be. They placed notices in the newspaper and posted flyers all around the old neighborhood. They even solicited message boards and chat rooms and missing children networks. The police had been unable to turn over any new information about Josh's whereabouts, despite the fact that they had received several anonymous phone calls from a woman urging them to compare this case with the stalking case that had been opened about 6 years before. One day, however, they got a call. The person said that he had seen Josh. Josh's father sat down on the couch with his wife. Holding a pen to a pad of paper, he asked the caller where he had seen the boy. The caller said, "In Florida." The father pressed further.
Where?
Anyone
Where
want?
in Florida did you see him?
The caller yelled, "At Disney World!" Laughed and hung up. His wife was clutching his free hand waiting for the information. She asked what the person had said, and Josh's father tore the piece of paper that read Florida, Diz, out of the pad and crumpled it up.
Nothing. It was nothing.
These calls persisted for months. People from all over the country would call and offer fake tips or brutal mockery. There weren't many of these calls, maybe a dozen, but there were enough. They couldn't just change the number. Josh might call, or at least someone who actually had seen him. So they transferred the phone number to a friend who offered to act as a buffer from these kind of callers. The friend said that she would press anyone who asked about Josh, but otherwise she would just treat it as an ordinary wrong number. She was a good friend to them, and my mom struggled to remember her name, but I already knew it was from the time I had talked to her. Her name was Claire. Josh's mother was not as strong as her husband was. If her grip on the world loosened when her son vanished, it broke when Veronica died. She had seen many people die at the hospital, but there is no amount of desensitization that can fortify a person against the death of her own child. She would visit Veronica twice a day, since she was recuperating at a different hospital, once before her shift and once afterward. On the day Veronica died, her mother was late leaving for work, and by the time she arrived at her daughter's hospital, Veronica had already passed. It was too much for her, and over the next couple of weeks, she became increasingly more unstable. She stopped going to work, but unlike the leave of absence she had taken almost 3 years before when Josh had disappeared, this time she had nothing to focus her attention on except her own pain. She would sometimes wander outside yelling for both Josh and Veronica to come home, and there were several times her husband found her staggering around my old neighborhood in the middle of the night, half-clothed and frantically searching for her son and daughter. Due to his wife's mental deterioration, Josh's dad could no longer travel for work, and so he began taking construction jobs that were less lucrative in an effort to be closer to home. When they began expanding my old neighborhood more, about 3 months after Veronica died, Josh's dad applied for literally every position that was vacant. He was hired.
Alright, I'll take over. Although he was qualified to lead the build sites, he took a job as a laborer. He would help build the frames and clean up the sites and do whatever else needed to be done. He even took odd jobs that would occasionally come up, mowing lawns, repairing fences, anything to keep from traveling. When they began clearing the woods in the area next to the tributary in order to transform the land into inhabitable property, Josh's dad was tasked with the responsibility of leveling the recently deforested lot. He accepted it eagerly, as this job guaranteed him at least several weeks of work close to home. On the fourth day, he arrived at a spot that he could not level. Each time he would drive over it with a machine, the patch of land would remain lower than all the surrounding earth. Frustrated, he got off the tractor to survey the area. He was tempted to simply pack more dirt into the depression, but he knew that would only be an aesthetic and temporary solution. He had worked construction for years, and he knew that root systems from large trees that had been recently cut down would often decompose, leaving weakness in the soil below that would manifest as weakness in the foundations above. Part of his motivation to do the job thoroughly was out of self-interest. With any luck, he would be contracted to help with the building, or at least placing, of the future homes on this property, so he didn't want to sabotage himself. But this was only a small part of his reasoning. Ultimately, he was a builder. Ignoring the problem was simply not a possibility. He weighed his options and elected to dig a little with a shovel in case the problem was shallow enough to fix without needing the backhoe that he would have to retrieve from the other site. I asked my mother where the site was, but it was almost a rhetorical question. I knew where it was. I had been to that spot before the soil was broken and before it had been filled in. I had fallen into that hole when I was 10 years old. I felt a tightening in my chest as my mother continued. He stabbed his shovel into the dirt to test its consistency, and to his surprise and disappointment, the shovel had disappeared almost entirely below the earth. The soil was weak, and while that would make it easier to move, he had not anticipated what might be such an extensive delay so soon into the job. Pulling back on the wooden handle, he moved a small mound of dirt off to the side and began his project. Before too long, he had dug a small hole about 3 feet down. When he reset his position and drove the metal blade into the earth, a tremor traveled up the pole and into his arms. His shovel had collided with something hard. He smashed his shovel against it repeatedly in an attempt to gauge the thickness of the root and the density of the network, when suddenly his shovel plunged through the resistance. Confused, he dug the hole wider. After about a half hour of excavating, he found himself standing on a brown blanket that was stretched across and stapled to a large box about 7 feet long and 4 feet wide. Our minds work too hard to avoid dissonance. If we hold a belief strongly enough, our minds will forcefully reject conflicting evidence so that we can maintain the integrity of our understanding of the world. Up until the very next moment, despite what all reason would have indicated, despite the fact that some small but suffocated part of him understood what was supporting his weight, this man believed, he knew, his son was still alive. My mom received a call at 6 o'clock in the evening. She knew who it was, but she couldn't understand what he was saying. However, what she did comprehend made her leave immediately. Down here. Now. Son. Please, God. When she arrived, she found Josh's dad sitting perfectly still with his back to the hole. He was holding the shovel so tightly it seemed that it might snap, and he was staring straight ahead with eyes that had no life or light in them. My mother approached him slowly and tried several times to get his attention, but he wouldn't respond to any of her words. He only reacted when she tried, with delicate and hesitant hands, to take the shovel from him. When she touched the shovel, his vice-like grip on the handle tightened, forcing all the blood out of his fingers to the point that they were as white as bone. He dragged his eyes slowly to hers and just said, "I don't understand." He repeated this as if he had forgotten all other words, and my mother could hear him still muttering it as she walked past both him and scraps of broken wood to look into the hole. My mother told me that she wished that she had gouged her eyes out before she faced downward into that crater, and I told her that I knew what she was about to say and that she need not continue. I looked at her face. It was expressing a look of such intense despair that it caused my stomach to turn. It struck me that she had known this for almost 10 years and was hoping that she'd never have to tell me. I imagined that she had made a firm decision all those years ago to never share this information. And as we sat there at the same weathered table that had forever been the meeting spot for our talks, I felt a twinge of guilt for forcing her to break that promise that she made to herself. Because she never intended to tell me, she never came up with the proper arrangement of words to describe what she saw. As I sit here now, I met with the same difficulty of articulation, but for different reasons. And, Gemma, you want to take the next three?
Yep. Josh was dead. His face was sunken in and contorted in such a way that it was as if the misery and hopelessness of all the world had been transferred to it. The assaulting smell of decay rose from the crypt, and my mother had to cover her nose and mouth to keep from vomiting. His skin was cracked, almost crocodilian, and a stream of blood followed these lines and dried on his face while pooling and staining the wood around his head. My mother wanted to look away. She wanted to move her eyes, even if just a little bit, so that she could see something else, anything else. She couldn't. Her eyes had locked with Josh's, which lay open and facing up out of the tomb. and although he couldn't return her gaze, it felt as if he was looking directly at her. She said by the look of him he had not been long dead, but she couldn't hazard a guess because she simply had no referent. Selfishly and horribly she wished that more time had passed before that day, so that time and nature could have brought the mercy of degradation to erase the pain and terror that was now etched into his face. She said that it felt as if he knew she'd be right there, that he had been waiting for her to enter his line of sight, his open mouth offering an all too late plea for help to ears that could do nothing for him. She forcefully covered her eyes to break the stare and attempted to confront the scene as a whole, but the rest of his body wasn't visible. Someone else was covering it. He was large and lay face down on top of Josh. As my mother's mind stretched itself to take in what her eyes were attempting to tell her, she became aware of the significance of the way in which he laid. He was holding Josh. Their legs lay frozen by death, but entangled like vines in some lush tropical forest. One arm rested under Josh's neck only to wrap around his body so that they might lay closer still, while the other arm lay limp with a bent elbow against the wood, his fingers entangled in Josh's hair. The man's back was covered in dirt, and as she looked back to the area near Josh's head, ashamedly avoiding his gaze, she could see that some of this scattered earth had mixed with the blood and formed mud that lay still wet in the damp casket. As the sun passed through the trees, its light reflected off something pinned to Josh's shirt. My mother stooped to one knee and raised the collar of her shirt over her nose so that she might block out the smell while she attempted to train her vision on the object rather than Josh's face. When she saw what had caught the sunlight, her legs abandoned her and she nearly fell into the tomb. It was a picture. The picture of me as a child. Gasping and trembling, she staggered backwards and collided with Josh's father, who still sat facing away from the hole. She understood why he had called her now, but she could not bring herself to tell him what she had kept from everyone for all these years. Not that the information could do any good now, anyway. Josh's family never knew about the night I had woken up in the woods. They never knew about the Polaroids. They never knew about the note she had found on my pillow. They never knew the real reason we had moved out of our old home with such haste. She had moved us into a new house to protect my life, and she had kept all these things a secret so that life might be a normal one. She had talked to the police. She knew now that she should have talked to Josh's parents, but there was nothing to say any more. As she sat there resting her back against Josh's father's, he spoke.
I can't tell my wife. I can't tell her that our little boy.
His speech staggered in fits as he pressed his wet face into his dirt-caked hands.
She couldn't bear it.
After a moment, he stood up, still shuddering, and lumbered towards the grave. With a final sob, he stepped down into the coffin and positioned himself over the dead man's body. Josh's dad was a big man, but not as big as the man in the box was. However, he seemed unable to grasp this fact. He grabbed the back of the man's collar and pulled hard. It was as if he intended to throw the man out of the grave in a singular motion. But the collar ripped, and the body fell back down on top of his son. As this happened, what air remained in Josh's lungs was violently forced out through his mouth, and the father shrieked as he both watched and heard his son's last empty breath.
You motherfucker!
He grabbed the man by the shoulders and heaved him back until he was off Josh completely. With one final straining motion, he shoved the man until the body sat awkwardly but upright against the wall of the grave. Josh's father rested his hands on his knees and breathed heavily and painfully as he looked down at his only son. He grunted with anger and turned his attention to the man, and my mother could see the rage disappear from his eyes as something else replaced it. He staggered back another step, and then another.
Oh God. Oh God. No. No, please God. Please God, no. No. No.
In a struggling but powerful movement, he lifted and pushed the corpse of the man completely out of the ground, and as he did this, there was the distinct sound of glass first hitting and then rolling against the wood. It was a bottle. He picked it up and absently handed it to my mother. It was ether.
Oh, Josh.
He sobbed as he cradled his son.
My boy. My baby boy. Why is there so much blood? What did he do to you?
As my mother looked at the man who now lay facing upwards, a chill came over her as she realized that she was facing, for the first time, the person who had haunted our lives for over a decade. Everything about our lives had changed since this person had entered it, and she had lost so much sleep thinking about this man. When she pictured him, whether in waking life or a dream, he was always evil and always terrifying. The cries of Josh's father seemed to confirm her worst fears. But as she stared at his face, she thought that this didn't look like who she imagined at all. This was just a man. As she looked upon his frozen expression, it actually looked serene. The corners of his lips were turned up only slightly. She saw that he was smiling. This wasn't the expected smile of a maniac from a film or a horror story. It wasn't the smile of a demon or the smile of a fiend. This was the smile of contentment or satisfaction. It was a smile of bliss. It was a smile of love.
Kenzie, would you like to take over?
Just read a couple more paragraphs. Gemma, my dog, is barking and won't shut up.
That's cool. Alright, when she looked down from his face, she saw a tremendous wound on his neck from where the skin had been ripped out. She realized that this wound must have been the source of the blood that stained Josh's face and the wood upon which his head rested. Initially, she was relieved by the realization that the blood had not been Josh's. Perhaps he had suffered less, and in a strange way, this small comfort amidst the madness set her slightly at ease. She looked to Josh's father, who sat in the coffin, still holding his son to his chest, and wondered if she should tell him. She wondered if this tiny consolation was worth distracting him from his own thoughts, whatever they may be.
Alright, he's done.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
She drew her eyes away from a moment to think, and they lingered on the scraps of wood that lay scattered to one side of the hole, many of them still connected to a large brown blanket. She recognized that these pieces of wood must have been the top of the box that Josh's father had torn away before calling her. Her drifting eyes and wandering thoughts both suddenly focused on what she saw in the debris, and she realized that she had been wrong to hope for any comfort now, in this place. Her mind raced to make excuses for the object's existence, but she was too tired to listen to anything but the truth anymore. She stared at the metal handle that was screwed into one of the boards of wood. She brought a hand up to her mouth and whispered, almost as if she was afraid to remind the world of what had happened.
They were alive.
Josh must have bitten the man's neck in a desperate attempt to get free, and although the man had died, Josh wasn't strong enough to move him. When my mother realized this, she began to cry at the thought of how long he might have laid there, and how he must have felt. She shuddered at the thought that he wouldn't have been able to see in the dark place. She crouched down beside the man and looked through his pockets for some kind of identification, but she only found a piece of paper. On it was a stick-figure drawing of a man holding hands with a small boy, and next to the boy were initials. She told me that the initials were mine. She asked me if I understood what it might mean, and I lied to her and said that I did not. As Josh's father carried his son out of the grave, my mom slid the piece of paper into her pocket and stood up. He was muttering that his son's hair had been dyed, but he wasn't talking to my mother. It seemed almost as if he had forgotten that she was there. When he looked at Josh, she understood that what his father was saying. Josh's hair was now dark brown, though it looked almost black as it clung to itself, cemented by blood. Josh's dad delicately laid his boy on the soft dirt and began gently pressing his hands against his son's pants to feel his pockets. My mother noticed that Josh was oddly dressed. His clothes were far too small for a boy his size. As the father applied pressure to his son's left pocket, there was a crinkle. Carefully, he retrieved a folded piece of paper from Josh's pocket and slowly unfolded it, not knowing what it might be. As he was returning the paper to its original shape, a small key fell from its fold and onto the dirt. He picked it up and looked at it as if he expected it to say something to him. After a moment, he had pushed it into his front pocket before returning his attention to the paper. He studied it, but was vexed. With no immediately meaningful information to be gained from it, he handed the piece of paper to my mother. She nervously accepted it, but she didn't recognize it either. When I asked her what it was, she told me that it was a map. I felt my heart shatter. Josh was finishing the map. That must have been his idea for my birthday present. He had resumed the expedition on his own. That was our first great adventure, and he had decided to finish it, for me, for us. Tears began streaming out of my eyes as I learned this, and I found myself desperately hoping that he hadn't been taken while working on it. Despite everything that had happened, he had kept the map in his pockets for almost 3 years. She heard Josh's father grunt angrily and looked in to see him pushing the man's body back into the ground. As he walked back toward the machine that he had found this spot for him, he put his hand on a canister of gasoline and paused with his back toward my mother.
You should go.
I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?
It's not your fault. It was me. I did this.
You can't think like that. There was
I
nothing.
did this!
He roared. There was silence for a long time. He seemed to be searching for the right words, or maybe he was just searching for a decision about whether he wanted to say them at all. Finally, he continued, his voice flat with almost no emotion at all.
About a month ago, I was cleaning up the site on the new development, a block over, when a guy approached me. He asked if I wanted to make some extra money. Well, with my wife not working, I'd just about take any job, so I asked him about it. He said that some kids had dug a bunch of holes on his property, and he offered me $100 to fill them in. I told him that was no problem, just tell me when, where and when. He said that he wanted to take some pictures for the insurance company first, but if I came back after 8 p.m. the next day, that would be fine. He said I'd have no problem finding the holes. I thought this guy was a sucker, since I knew clearing that lot was coming up for the crew I was on, so someone would have had to do it anyway. I actually felt bad for taking his money. It didn't even look like he'd have $100, but he put the bill in my hand, and I did the job the next night. I've been so exhausted that I didn't even think about it after it was done. I didn't think about it.
There was a long pause as he seemed to lose control of his voice.
I didn't think about it until today, when I pulled that same guy off my son.
He pointed at the grave, and his emotions finally broke free again as tears fell from his eyes and mucus from his nose.
He paid me $100 so that I would bury him with my boy.
It was as if saying it aloud forced him to accept what had happened, and he collapsed onto the ground in tears. My mother could think of nothing to say, so she stood there in silence for what felt like a lifetime as she tried to comprehend what he had just told her. She knew that he wouldn't tell his wife about any of this. My mother knew that this would be the only time he could reach out for any comfort at all. She knelt down and held him while he cried for his son. Finally, she asked what he would do about Josh, where he would take him, but all he said was,
His final resting place won't be here with this monster.
He rose and stepped delicately around his boy while he walked toward the grave with a canister of gasoline in his hand. My mother left what used to be my old woods, but what was now just a mausoleum with no walls. As she looked back when she reached her car, she could see black smoke billowing and diffusing against the amber sky, and she hoped against all hope that Josh's parents would be okay.
Alright, I'll take over. When my mother had finished her story, we sat in silence for a long time. I wanted to feel anger or agony, but I felt nothing but a hollow emptiness inside. As we sat there, I realized that Josh's parents had called my mother when Josh went missing. She must have lied to them in the same way that she had lied to me. Josh's parents must still believe to this day that their son really ran away. I stood to leave. There was only one question that I had for my mother, only one thing I wanted to know from her, but she couldn't answer it. I don't know why I expected that she could. I left my mom's house without saying much else. I told her that I loved her and that I would talk to her soon, but I didn't know what soon means for us now. I got into my car and left. As I drove, That stupid riddle about going to the woods came back into my mind. That was enough to make me feel again. I remembered Josh and me talking about it in those woods nearly half my lifetime ago. I cried so hard that I had to pull my car over, and I again asked the question that my mother had been unable to answer. I asked it aloud, though no one was around to answer it but me. Why Josh? It was supposed to be me. It had always been me. So why wasn't it when it mattered the most? Why did I wake up in the winter woods when I was a child instead of being entombed in them? Why couldn't it have stopped then, with me? But I'll never know the answer to this question. I'll never know why he just left me there. There's no one I can ask now. Maybe he just couldn't do it. He tried, but in the end, he was just too weak to take me. As I sat there in my car on the side of the road, I struggled to breathe between my exhausted sobs. I collapsed on the steering wheel and whimpered out that I wished that he had been stronger. I understood now. As the story became clearer with each detail revealed through the conversations with my mother, I had watched the pieces all fall into place, but I still couldn't understand why it had all stopped so long ago. Why it had all simply ended. Sitting in my car that night, I saw it all clearly for the first time. As an adult, I could see the connections that were lost on a child who tends to see the world in snapshots rather than as a sequence. The picture was complete, but I wished I had never seen it at all. I left the gas station and drove the rest of the way home and thought, which is all that's left for me to do anymore. I think about Josh. I loved him then, and I love him even still. I miss him more now that I know I'll never see him again, and I find myself wishing that I had hugged him the last time I saw him. I wish that he could have stayed at my birthday party longer that day, even if we didn't say another word to one another. We could have just sat there. That would have been nice. I think about Josh's parents, how much they had lost and how quickly that loss had come. They were good people, kind people. The father had called my mother the terrible day so that she could keep me safe, but no one had called him to help him protect Josh. His parents don't know about my connection to any of this, but I could never look them in the eyes now. We still live in the same town, and I worry every day that I'll run into them somewhere. I find myself hoping that I don't see them, and I feel sick when I have that thought. I think about Veronica. I had only really come to know her later in my life, but for those brief few weeks, I think I had really loved her. I think about my mother. She had tried so hard to protect me. She had done everything she possibly could to keep me safe. She was stronger than I will ever be. I think about what our lives might be like now if I had just let my balloon go with Chris's, or even a single second sooner or later than I did. Maybe someone else would have found it and everyone would be okay. Maybe I'd still have my friend and his parents would still have a son. Josh had been missing for almost 3 years, almost a fifth of his life. I try to pretend that I don't know what the man might have done with Josh for all that time, just like I pretend that maybe Josh wasn't in the passenger seat that night Veronica was hit. I find myself pretending a lot now. But mostly, I just think about Josh. Sometimes I wish that he never sat across from me that day in kindergarten. That I'd never known what it was like to have a real friend. Sometimes I like to dream that he's in a better place now, but that's only a dream, and I know that. The world is a cruel place made crueler still by man. There would be no justice for my friend, no final confrontation, no vengeance. It's been over for almost a decade now for everyone but me. I miss you, Josh. I'm sorry that you chose me, but I always cherish my memories of you. We were explorers. We were adventurers. We were friends. And that's the end.
Yep.
Uplifting, huh?
Yep. So,
I didn't want to say this while you were reading, but thank you everyone for sending love to Eli.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. And everyone in the chat, let me know what you thought of the story. And I do have actually something that will lighten things up a bit if you'd like to hear it.
Sounds good.
As long as it's not a pun.
No, no pun.
Yes, pun.
No pun.
Even though it said that the coworker was not Samantha, I just imagined the other kids all watched my mom's coworker perform magic tricks, like how to take the back seats out of your car, how to inadvertently frustrate and anger your superior at work.
No, just how to make the back seats of your car disappear.
I knew someone in my high school who died while huffing paint the summer before junior year. I'm so sorry to hear that, Crimson. Pour one out for
Nice.
our boy Josh. He took the maniac with him before he could get his friend. Yep. That was chilling but great. It was a great story. So yeah, Josh is a true king. Story that got me into horror way back in college, and I never looked back. Great reading, you three. Oh, thank you, Mr. Kuhn.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I say as I put up the banner that said, well, you can't see since it's the one with Gemma, but yeah, the banner has our new catchphrase. We're bad at this, but thank you for your faith in us.
We're mostly bad at this when Gemma's not there to let us know she's disappointed in us.
Yes.
Just this, like, it's just this look of disappointment.
I don't know what the story
You look
is,
so
but still
annoyed with us in
Yeah.
the picture.
Oh, see, yeah, like I like Gemma. I think I had to explain it very quickly because I think I asked you to send the picture to Cricket first. Just like, can you send Cricket a picture of yourself just looking disappointed and annoyed as possible?
I sent Cricket a few. Like, it was one I was like, well, here's me being annoyed, but in a more sort of jovial way. Here's one of me looking like I want to kill someone. And here's one. And here's a recent photograph for context.
I also love that because you're in front of us, you can't see that we're giving a thumbs up. So it looks like we're just putting our arms around you like,
Yeah.
we know we're pissing you off, but you're our friend.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, come on, buddy.
Read with us.
Come on. It's like, come on, Gemma, lighten up.
And meanwhile, she's thinking, you're so bad at this.
Crimson says he was a good guy. I didn't know him super well, but he was a good person in general. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's
Bagel says it was a depressing story, but great. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Despite
if we can just take a minute from the two of us acting like jackasses. I really loved that. And I think what my favorite part of that story is that unlike a lot of stories that are read over at the Bad Creepypasta channel, is that, I'm not sure how old this guy was when he wrote it, but he did seem to be really in tune with the way a child would think, and I thought it was very charming. Like how he and Josh became friends over the fact that they had the same lunchbox, or, the way that they would be nice to Mrs. Maggie, but in private they would know they didn't realize that anything was wrong, but they just thought she was a funny woman. It's really endearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And
yeah. What you were gonna say? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I found this story a few years back. I'd actually, but like, I think because obviously I bought the Kindle version for reading it on like the full, because I think there was stuff that was definitely added to it from the actual sort of story that I read on, like, it's either the Creepypasta wiki or it was some other sort of place where this was put up on, and it was a lot shorter because there wasn't as much detail, but the detail really added more to the story for me.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one thing that I really like is, like it pointed out at the end, that there was no big showdown with the kidnapper. Like, most creepypastas, it would be like, oh, we had a big fight, like trying to make it sound dramatic, but it just sounds stupid.
Yeah, if this was written by a teenage creepypasta writer, it would have been the protagonist in the box. It would have been him biting his neck and then clawing his way out to escape, and that, You know, it haunts me to this day, but hey, I'm still alive.
Yeah. Oh, and did I forget to mention throughout this entire book that I've been studying kung fu since I was 5?
Yeah.
I also like that there wasn't any sort of the usual sort of tropes when it comes to these types of stories where like they'll go and here's something just incredibly shocking to show you. Let's with like there's a bit more nuance, I think. Even though the imagery that it conjures up was quite shocking, it wasn't like here's something like here's like like one of the no words.
Yeah.
Like I like that part about it, that there was no sort of implications there. Or
that, you know, they could have gone really shocking when they find Josh's body and been like, he was naked and there was dried sticky stuff all over him, and, you know,
it was ectoplasm.
there was a cloth full of chloroform over his mouth and blah blah blah. Like it was very restrained, and that made it all the more effective.
Yeah. And, actually, one thing I want to say about what you said, Gemma, and another point is, like you said, like no shocking imagery. Like there was at one point, I'd say, like when they're running through the woods, thinking they're being chased by someone, but they find out it was just a deer. Like that's an example of like shock value done well, like building it up. And then the other thing is like one of the biggest sins in a creepypasta is, you know, I felt compelled to do this. Where it's like, no, you didn't. Just shut up and leave it alone. But in this, like, the couple of times where it said, like, that the protagonist felt compelled to do something, it felt real. It felt natural because, Kenzie, like you said, he's a child. Like, he knows he shouldn't look, but even terrified children still have that curiosity to them.
Because he's not going to be thinking of long-term consequences, whereas, you know, in stupid creepypastas, it's anywhere from high school age to older, where you're very much aware of that you shouldn't be doing something, so you don't.
Exactly.
And curiosity got the better of me.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, Kenzie, you saying, you know, adult characters in these pastas, there's something I want to bring up that I noticed in stories like Mage Hour, Complex, whatever it was called.
MCCP.
Yeah, the sequel to it. Where,
the one with the Digimon one that we did with that one.
Yeah.
Like the one that we did. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Is like the way that these authors write the supposed adult characters, like the way he wrote the character in that story is like he's just chilling up in his room playing on his phone. It's like they seem to think that when they grow up and get married, that their life will be no different than what it is as a preteen or a teenager. It's like,
I mean, I didn't even think that main character was supposed to be a adult. He was working, it sounded like he was working part-time at a movie theater.
Yeah. No, I mean in the MCCP thing. Like, it's like you're not describing a wife, you're describing a new mommy. And then like the children are just like your younger siblings. You're not describing yourself as a father and a husband.
Right.
Want to get some comments here. We fell behind a bit. Darius says, "This is Gemma. She wants to kill us." You both say, smiling brightly.
Yep.
Mr. Kuhn says, "Gemma.
This is our friend Gemma. She hates us."
Mr. Kuhn says, "Gemma, don't talk to me or my too dramatic reading children ever again."
Sums it up perfectly.
I look like a disappointed mother.
It's like she's mad at you guys, like as if you were teasing us, but we were the instigators and we're just mocking you from behind.
Yeah, we're like, the kid's like, yeah, we got away with it.
She's our Karen mom who can't see our faults. Meanwhile, we're just rubbing it in how big of jackasses we are. I know too many people like that.
Yes. Darius says, I remember reading the original years ago, and yeah, there was definitely stuff added to it. Bagel, yeah, he knew how to write a child character, not like the Jeff the Killer kid, who was like, I was perplexed at the aberration who placed himself upon my window pane at approximately 2100 hours. Oh, and actually, something I've wanted to bring up, like, in public, like as public as this is for a while now. Something that no one's ever pointed out in a reading of Jeff the Killer. The kid says, I saw a pair of two eyes. It's like, well, yes, you said a pair, so I assumed it was two eyes. Or is it a pair of two eyes? So are there four eyes? Are you trying to make a glasses joke?
Person writing it, he's a kid. Kids are redundant, right?
Yeah, meanwhile, I'm pretty sure any kid in this world with Down syndrome was smarter than that author. Mr. Kuhn, I heard true crime stories that end like this, where the murderer just ends up being found dead and there's nothing more they can do, grounded and depressing ending. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very realistic. A lot of times you're not going to get the closure where something really bad happens to you.
Yep. What makes this really scary is that kidnapping and murders like that happen all the time. There is no grand spectacle battle. It's a life being snuffed out. Yes, Crimson, indeed. He found Josh's corpse inside a giant jar. Darius, no! and Bagel just responds to that, Keck. Darius, it doesn't. It's because they don't have the mental ability to comprehend it. Why would they not play games on their phone? It's so much fun. And other thoughts like that. Yeah. And Raptor says, MCCP, the creepypasta OC so generic. She makes them. She makes.
We're not sure what you're referencing in the Raptor.
Yeah, she makes look like.
I think you left out the title you were going for.
Yeah.
I do that all the time too. Don't worry.
See, now
I don't know.
What was that, Gemma?
I was going to say next dramatic reading, I'll bring in my waifu girl voice. I'm kidding.
No, do it.
Actually,
you know what? No, you're the good one at this. I'll do it.
Yeah.
You just have to coach me for the next week.
Okay.
Do the Shadow of Blood voice.
Oh god, that voice. Where it's like, well, don't read.
Oh.
Actually, I've been listening to your reading of the Sonic EXE remake on my drives to and from work, and I heard your voice you did for the character Rachel. The second I heard the first word, I just said out loud, "God, Gemma, please no."
The Bye Bye Man. That's what the
Bye-bye.
Raptor was referencing.
Okay.
Making this the second time anyone has mentioned the Bye Bye Man in 5 years.
Raptor.
What was the voice we did for Rachel again? Was that the one where I gave her a Russian accent, or was that the one where I gave her the Shadow of Blood accent thing that I did?
More Shadow of Blood.
Oh dear. I'll have to watch those ones.
Oh, and Raptor, upon realizing his mistake for his comment, fuck!
Darius, I'm assuming it's your average crappy hour flick. No, Darius, it's worse.
What is it actually?
The Bye Bye Man?
Yeah.
Don't watch it. Don't watch it. Don't watch it.
Gemma, you know what you've just done.
No, watch it, but only after you've had like at least 3 edibles.
Okay.
Lots of alcohol.
Because you'll get a lot less annoyed.
Okay.
Like sometimes, because I saw it in the theater sober, because the guy I was on a date with and I thought it would just be a laugh, but we were mostly just baffled by like at how these were choices and they went with them.
The worst movie I ever saw on a date was the movie Meet the Spartans, and I left about halfway through. I went to the bathroom and cried for half an hour because the guy I was with was laughing so hard.
Oh my god.
I was like, I can't leave. Can I leave?
I'm laughing, but that's actually so sad.
It is. This was how long ago would that be? Like 2000, very, very early 2008.
I will say, if you can't get through like an entire movie of that kind of schlock, and I do not blame you. Ralph the Movie Maker did a pretty good review of it.
Alrighty.
Yes, his
If it
review's
were
good.
me, I think I'd be a lot more vitriolic and hammer in a lot more about how bad the effects are. But that's just me.
The effects are terrible.
Oh my, that was the only time that actually got a genuine laugh out of me, is when you see there's a dog in it. It's not a real dog, and it's not supposed to look like a real dog, but the CGI is so bad. That the first time it appears was the only time I legitimately laughed. Sober.
I will say that when I saw the trailer for the Bye Bye Man, right, I thought it was fake.
Oh Jesus!
Because I was like, there's no way someone there's people are seriously going, oh my god, it's the Bye Bye. Don't. I'm just like,
yeah, like you see it on in the ads on YouTube, and you're thinking, oh, okay, this is I guessing maybe a channel is making a fake movie trailer or something, and then you see it on TV, and you're like, oh my god, it's real.
It's one of those things. Did you say that line out loud when you wrote it?
yeah.
And so I looked into it because I was so. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, Jacob and I were at the cinema recently. I think it was around the time it was about 2019, and it was when the movie Countdown was coming out, and we watched the trailer for that, thinking that we were literally watching a trailer from Tropic Thunder. At the beginning of Tropic Thunder, we thought it was oh, this looks funny. It's a funny trailer. What? Wait, this is Blumhouse. Wait, this is a film about an app that counts down to your death. What? Wait, that's a real movie.
When are we going to learn that haunted phone movies should not be a thing? Did you learn nothing from One Missed Call?
Now, hey,
we're going to cast that demon out of this cell phone.
The original One Missed Call is good.
It is. I remember watching it with you, Manny, on I think it was just on a call, where we're just like, all right, I'll watch One Missed Call while I speak to you.
Yeah.
I'm not bothered to watch the whole thing. They don't speak English. It's just spider tongue for over an hour.
Kenzie, when I thought you couldn't get any cooler. There you go. Casual racism, and I laugh my ass off.
For real though, a lot of Japanese horror just too weird, even for me. But I'd be willing to give the One Missed Call one a shot. I have heard it's good.
Okay, well, in that case, the three of us at least need to watch. It's a Japanese one called Reincarnation.
Yes, I need to watch that one.
I have not heard of it. I'm down.
Okay.
Yeah. Also,
Mr. Coon, but don't you guys realize phone bad?
Yeah.
But both, I'm pretty sure you might have seen these ones already, Manny. But if you haven't, Kenzie, you should watch Noroi the Curse and Pulse.
Yes. Yeah, no.
Pulse, I've heard of. Have not seen either. I gotta write them down somewhere.
Yeah, Noroi especially is good.
Yeah. Pulse is really unsettling, but don't watch the remake, of course.
Never.
But if you enjoy Noroi, don't get excited because I looked up, a Region 1 DVD and they sell for $250 at the cheapest.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, apparently it was one of those things like they just made so few copies of it, even though it was very well received. So now it's very rare. It's
Demon Days on vinyl.
Yeah. Or like Mega Man X8. Like, X7 was so poor, so badly done, and sold so little that even though X8 was a very good game that people really liked, they thought, well, the last one sucked, so this one's going to suck too, so let's just put out a limited number of copies.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, that's far from the dumbest thing that Capcom's done in the last decade, so...
Yep.
But, yeah, Gemma, you saying not to watch, Bye Bye Man, I'm sorry, I'm just flashing back to what was it called, Smiley?
Oh.
For the lulz.
I will say, it is retroactively hilarious now. only because there's this one scene where Shane Dawson says that he doesn't think pedophilia is funny.
and they call him Pedo Bear, and I'm like, it's Pedo Bear.
I don't know. I just don't think that shit like that is ever funny. In real life, hey, 13-year-old cousin, eat this weenie so to entertain the molesters who are actually probably watching my shit.
Oh my god.
LOL.
Unbelievable.
The amount of YouTubers that don't really do anything anymore in Smiley is hilarious. So you've got people like Tobuscus in that movie.
Well, we know why for him.
and then like a bunch of like people that I've seen on Jack's films.
Yeah.
Daystorm Power. Who's heard from him in forever?
Yeah.
And I gotta say about the one line near the end of that movie where he's like, Smiley costumes are gonna be in Halloween stores. Right there, I was like, that's what this was all about. You just trying to create like some iconic character to get merchandise to make money.
Which I have not seen one.
Yeah.
Ever.
Okay, at my work, it used to be that every year a Halloween store would rent out the one property. And one year, I saw a Jeff the Killer costume. But it was...
I did too, and I also saw Laughing Jack.
Yeah, but like...
I hated it.
They
I was so upset.
They weren't called Jeff the Killer and Laughing Jack, though. Like, I guess they couldn't use the actual names or something. But,
yeah, because they... Like, who did you contact to, like, get the trademark for? Oh, that some teenager in, I don't know, Wisconsin.
Yeah, who doesn't understand how alcohol works.
Was it, like, Jeffrey the Stabber and Giggly Jake? Is that what they called them?
Like, pretty much.
I think it was just Evil Clown and...
like... homicidal teenager.
Yeah, something like that.
I love the names. I love the names for like knockoff costumes. One of my favorites is like a Linda from Bob's Burgers costume, and it's called Sympathetic Burger Wife.
Sympathetic Burger Wife.
Oh my god, what would they do for Tina? I want this. Where's this collection?
I'll have to find it because there was also one. It was like one for Assassin's Creed, and I can't remember what it was, but it was really funny.
I remember seeing a Transformers costume, but it said deformed car.
God damn it! Where do you find these? Because it's Spirit Halloween. I guess they sell better quality ones because they actually have the names.
Kenzie, I don't know if... I'm sure I've told this story on the channel before, but I don't know if I've told you before. So my brother absolutely hates, loathes, and abhors Nicolas Cage.
So, my condolences that you are related to someone who is so fundamentally wrong.
Yeah. So I think it was like back in 2017. I found a Facebook page called Nicolas Cage's face on things. And it was just this guy. He would Photoshop Cage's face onto like movie posters, into photos and everything. And I would send my brother like 5 of them a day. After about 2 weeks, he just sends me a text in all caps saying, "Where do you find these things?" I was cracking up for half an hour straight.
I don't know if you guys have ever watched Repsion, but whenever he does, the like his X-Files series on a YouTuber, he holds up this notebook that is just Nick Cage's face.
Yes.
It is my favorite item I have ever seen, and I want it.
I think I found some. Right, here's one. It was here's a Hermione Granger costume, but it's Hermione Grinder.
Amazing.
Got I've got one where it's you can be it's basically Neo from the Matrix, but you can also turn it into like a sort of a reverend costume, and it's called Cyberman or Padre.
Yay!
You've got instead of Where's Waldo or Where's Wally, it's just Where's the Stripey Dude.
That's my favorite one.
And I've got the Beetlejuice costume called Juice Demon.
Juice Demon! He comes out of a packet of Capri Sun.
That sounds like a concept for a villain that like the Japanese woman came up for in her like dying days of Inuyasha. Like, this is when they fight new villain Juice Demon.
And
or it sounds like a like a D grade Batman villain, like with the Condiment King and Kite Man.
Whoa! Condiment King is A level.
Agree to disagree. I've Harley Quinn has really warmed me up to Kite Man, though.
And then you've got Katniss from the Hunger Games, but it's Hungry Rebel Girl.
Yeah.
Hungry.
See, what shop do I go to find these? Spirit Halloween just has, like, the normal ones. Like, last Halloween, me and two friends, we dressed up as the Sanderson sisters. On the packet, it just actually had their names.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, which one did you dress up as?
I was Sarah.
Of course, I love Sarah. Sarah's the best.
Though we watched it also on Halloween, because she had a little party at her house, and we put on Hocus Pocus, and rewatching, I'm like, why am I dressed up as the vaguely pedophile one? I was like, suddenly I'm a lot more uncomfortable wearing this.
Oh yeah, that song does go, "Come little children."
But there's also this scene in the beginning where she's like, where they're deciding what to do, and she looks at him and she's like, hang him up and let me play with him. And I'm like, no!
Whenever I used to play, like, because whenever, like, when I used to watch Hocus Pocus on my VHS back in the day, and like, we used to play, like, I think with my cousins, and like my older cousin was always Winifred, and Kate, my sister, was always the one played by Kathy Najimy, or whatever her name is, the one with the Hoover, and I was always Sarah, and I'm just like, why am I supposed to be the one that's like dumb for a reason? And what was that?
Emperor Crimson says the knockoff costume name for me would be Beanfather Michael.
Yes. It's really funny how we ended up choosing which witch we were going to be, because it really all just came down to what sizes were left in each costume. That was literally the only deciding factor, because certain ones were gone.
Fair. We've got Sonic, but it's Blue Speed Mouse. And
who wrote these? My grandpa.
It seems like it. All right, we've got Harley Quinn, a dangerous girl.
Okay, Kenzie, see that's like a comic reviewer that I watch on YouTube says like these are the kinds of names that your grandmother or your aunt comes up with for the supervillains, and the only one that she actually knows is Dr. Doom. And no, I do not watch Linkara.
Good.
I
watch your boy Zach.
You've got a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle costume, and it's this pubescent frog of silent war.
Oh. Pubescent frog silent war. Mr. Coon says, "Blue Speed Mouse, gotta move quick."
Some of them at least try to just play on synonyms, and then others, it's like just Google Translate.
It's like
And then sorry, just found the one of Dumbledore, and it's Potter Teacher Wizard Boy.
That sounds like...
Oh yes, Potter Teacher Wizard Boy.
Like Man Hook, car door hook hand.
And there's one for Edward Cullen, and it's Nighttime Romeo.
How do you even have a costume for him?
I don't know. Are these all from like Party City or something?
Oh, I know where I'm getting my costume next year.
Yes. Binding of Isaac equals crying child. Okay.
But it was support. Yeah, it was supportive burger wife was my favorite.
Oh my god, that's my favorite one.
Yeah.
I can't find what the Assassin's Creed one was, but it was really funny.
Oh, Raptor
If you
says
find
his
it, you
would be,
gotta put it in Discord.
his would be Tyrannosaurus Gamer. Bill Cosby Dream Demon.
I'm probably gonna have to head off though, guys, because it's 11:30 for me, so I should probably head off.
All right,
Yeah,
but,
I'm gonna grab dinner.
Kenzie, you should be pleased that we actually ended this in under 2 hours.
Yes, this is why I like having Gemma here.
I'm the stickler for time.
Cause like this is what we tried doing last week. I said, tell Gemma to give you her opinion of when we should end this.
Okay, wait, one last one. Solid Snake, erect reptile. Okay, guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying with us through all of Penpal. Next week, we'll be back with another story to give a dramatic reading for, or at least try. And join us back here tomorrow, me, Kenzie, and Raptor Rex for more of Empress Teresa. So, please like, comment, subscribe. Please really do like the videos, please. I'm desperate. And I'll see